What does it take for a scattered group of colonies to become the most powerful nation on Earth? A land once filled with uncertainty, wild frontiers, and rebellion would soon shape the modern world. This is the story of how America rose from wooden ships and muskets to satellites and skyscrapers. It's a story of courage, contradictions, and a relentless belief in freedom, even when it came at a heavy price. So, buckle up. From 13 colonies to a global superpower, this is the epic 423-year journey of the United States of America. The birth of a new world, 1607 to 1776. It began in 1607, when English settlers landed in Jamestown, Virginia, carving out the first permanent British colony in North America. They were dreamers and survivors, facing hunger, disease, and the unknown. Across the vast wilderness, indigenous nations watched, their lands slowly transformed by foreign hands. Soon, 13 colonies emerged, each with its own identity, yet bound by one growing frustration: British control. Taxes, trade restrictions, and lack of representation pushed the colonists to the edge. In 1775, rebellion sparked, and by 1776, the world heard words that would echo for centuries. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. The Declaration of Independence, signed by courageous men like Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, and Benjamin Franklin, wasn't just a political document. It was a promise. A new nation was born, but survival was not guaranteed. Revolution and the Price of Freedom, 1776 to 1789. The American Revolution was no fairy tale. Farmers became soldiers. Women ran homes and farms while the men fought. George Washington, with grit and faith, led an army that was often outnumbered and undersupplied. Against the might of the British Empire, the revolutionaries stood firm, not because they had stronger weapons, but because they had stronger convictions. In 1781, victory came at Yorktown, and by 1789, George Washington became the first president of the United States, setting the foundations of democracy, though imperfect, into motion. But the dream of freedom was complicated. Not everyone was free. Slavery continued, a deep scar that would define much of America's future battles. Expansion, dreams, and division, 1800 to 1860. The young nation was restless. It bought the Louisiana Territory from France, doubling its size overnight. Pioneers pushed westward, chasing the American dream before it even had a name. Yet expansion came at a cost. Native American tribes were displaced, cultures destroyed, and lives lost in the march toward manifest destiny. As railroads stretched across the land, another divide deepened. North versus South. One fought for industry and progress, the other for plantations and slavery. The stage was set for America's darkest chapter. The Civil War, Freedom's Fire, 1861 to 1865. In 1861, the nation tore itself apart. Brother fought brother. Over 600,000 lives were lost, more than any other American war. President Abraham Lincoln stood firm, believing that a house divided could not stand. His Emancipation Proclamation in 1863 changed the war's purpose, turning it from a political fight into a moral crusade for human freedom. By 1865, the Union was preserved and slavery was abolished. But Lincoln paid the ultimate price, assassinated just days after victory. The war ended, but America's wounds were far from healed. Rebuilding and Rising, 1865 to 1900. After the Civil War came Reconstruction, an era of rebuilding and redefining identity. Freedmen sought new lives, while the South struggled to rise from ashes. Immigrants poured into the country, Italians, Irish, Chinese, all seeking opportunity. Skyscrapers pierced the clouds, factories roared, and cities like New York and Chicago became beacons of ambition. It was the Gilded Age, glittering on the outside, but hiding poverty and corruption beneath. Yet innovation thrived. Thomas Edison, Nikola Tesla, and Alexander Graham Bell, transformed human life with light, energy, and communication. America was becoming something new, industrial, confident, and unstoppable. World Wars and the Rise of a Superpower, 1914 to 1945. When World War I erupted, America hesitated until 1917. Then, with millions of men and endless resources, it tipped the scales of victory. But peace was short-lived. In 1929, the Great Depression struck like a thunderstorm. Factories closed, families starved, and hope faded. President Franklin D. Roosevelt's New Deal helped the nation crawl back, slowly. Then came World War II. After the attack on Pearl Harbor, America mobilized like never before. Men fought in Europe and the Pacific. Women worked in factories as Rosie the Riveters. By 1945, after dropping atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the war ended, and America stood atop the world as a global superpower. Cold War and Cultural Revolution, 1945 to 1991. Two superpowers remained, the United States and the Soviet Union, locked in a silent struggle of ideology and influence. The Cold War wasn't fought with bullets, but with propaganda, science, and space exploration. America landed the first men on the moon in 1969, proving innovation could outshine fear. At home, revolutions brewed. Civil rights, women's liberation, and counterculture movements reshaped society. Leaders like Martin Luther King Jr. dreamed of equality, while young Americans protested wars abroad and injustices at home. America was changing, messy, loud, and beautiful in its contradictions. The new millennium and global influence, 1991 till present. The Soviet Union fell, leaving America as the sole superpower. The world looked to the U.S. for leadership, for culture, for technology. But challenges came fast. Terrorism, wars, financial crises, and political divides. From September 11th to the tech revolution, America reinvented itself once more, leading in innovation, culture, and science. Companies like Apple, Google, and SpaceX became modern symbols of American ambition. Meanwhile, social movements continued to push the nation toward a more inclusive dream. Today, America's story is still being written, filled with triumphs, trials, and transformation. 423 years, from wooden ships to Mars rockets, from rebellion to global power. The United States is a story of contradictions, of freedom and struggle, of dreams and divisions. Yet through it all, one idea burns brighter than ever: the belief that tomorrow can be better than today. That's the real story of America. Not its perfection, but its pursuit of it.